Alright guys, this video is going to show you how to go about creating the CAM project number 1. This is essentially our first attempt at using the manufacture feature in Fusion 360. Now the first thing that we need to do is create our design. Now if you recall from the handout, the design essentially is a nameplate with raised letters, and what I like to do is I like to approach my object by creating the piece of stock, the same size of the piece of stock that I'm going to be cutting on in my CNC machine. I'd like to create that inside Fusion and then use that to create my object and my features and all that. So what I'm going to do is just create a rectangle box to represent my piece of stock. And if you look at the sheet, the size of this is 2.5 inches wide and 11 inches long. So this will help us understand the size that we're working with and be able to create the details and features that will fit on that perfectly, rather than trying to make it and then after the fact trying to make it fit our piece of stock. So this is a really good habit to work with and develop so that you don't have extra work to do later. All right, so the thickness of this piece of wood is 3/4 of an inch or 0.75 inches. And this represents our piece of wood that we're going to be placing into the CNC machine. Now, to create the raised letters of our nameplate, what we want to do is create a sketch on the top, and then we're going to find text that we like using the text tool. I'm going to use this type. If I had something circular or a path I wanted to follow, that would be what I want. But for something simple like this, we just create a text box. And I usually just make it the same size that we're working with. Place my text in here. I'm just going to put my name in all caps, and the text height is going to be 2 inches is about safe. That gives us enough around it. But as you can see, my name actually sticks out. So what I need to do is I need to make it smaller. And depending on the length of your name and even the type of font that you pick, you're going to have to do the same thing. Now, one thing you will notice is that there are a million fonts on here. You should actually spend a few minutes kind of looking through these and finding one that you really like. The one thing I would caution you, though, is a font like this is going to have really, really thin areas. Well, those thin areas are inherently weak, and if you accidentally drop it or something gets pushed against it, those areas would easily break. So the one thing I would tell you is that choose a font that's a little bit thicker, because that's going to equal more strength when all that's left essentially for 100 or 200 thousandths of an inch is the blue lettering. So pick something that's a little chunkier, and that will be a little bit stronger. I can't remember what I traditionally use, but there's no shortage of them on here, that is for sure. If you have a longer name, actually something that kind of squishes it together could be beneficial, but it's totally up to you and your choice. I'm just going to look through here and just, that one is pretty decent. I can do that. But as you see, it is a little long, so I'm going to need to make the height a little smaller to compensate. Let's try a 1.75. Okay, that keeps me on, but I'm right at the edges, so I think I'm going to take off the 5 and do 1.7, because I like to leave just a little gap around the edge for the machine to clean up. Actually, I'm going to bring it back a little bit, 1.65. Okay, that actually looks good. Now I have some choices here. I'm going to do a center line and both top and bottom to save me from having to move the box around. That's a really easy way to get everything evenly spaced, if you ask me. There is an option here for character spacing. I've actually never really played with this, but that's something you can do if you want. This looks good. I'm actually pretty happy with this. I can try and bold it and see if it's a little chunkier. That might be something that you want to do. Maybe you like the italic effect. I'm going to go with the italic effect. Actually, I kind of like that. Gives it a little more pizzazz, so to speak. Okay, so now that I have that drawn, there's a couple different ways to do this. Let's go to Extrude, and With Extrude, I can't really choose the area around it, but what I can do is I can bring my text up. If I can select my text, let's try that again. Select only the blue. So right now it's giving me cut, but I don't want cut, I want to raise it. So bring it up. And I'm going to do that. A half inch is pretty darn tall. I'm going to do 200 thousandths. That's actually pretty nice. Now here's the problem: is this just became 3/4 of an inch, which is the thickness of my stock, plus 200 thousandths. So this is almost an inch thick. Well, the really easy way to fix this, since we want things to be accurate and we want to have good practice, is I can go back to my extrude step. And instead of making that 0.75, I can just take 200 thousandths off that and make 0.55. So I'm ending at the 0.75 height, or the 3/4 of an inch. So now I am truly representing what my nameplate would look like, starting with 3/4 inch thick stock and taking away 200 thousandths in and around the letters. Now, I also want to do a contour, cut a contour around the side that's going to give me um, rounded corners. I think that looks very nice. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to project our object, and then let's see if I can do fillets on the projection. I don't think I can, but what I can do is put arcs in there. So 3-point arc. If I can get to start at the right spot. Work with me, computer. There we go. Now these are all going to be tangent, as we know, but I'll go back and add that in. For radius, I think probably half an inch would be really nice, but let's get this all constrained first. If you think a smaller radius would look good, feel free to change the radius, but you do need to put a radius in here for this project. Sharp corners are actually much more difficult for a CNC to do than a radius as well, so it's actually really good practice. So even if you choose a really small radius, do put one in there. Even 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch, it's hardly discernible, but for the CNC, it's a much easier thing to do. I like a generous radius, so I'm going to go with ½ inch. And then instead of doing dimensions on all of them, I'm just going to use my equals constraint. I'm all about doing things easier and being a little more clear. All right, now let's extrude that, and hopefully that'll work the way it should. Cut, cut. I'm going to cut these 4 corners off, and then we will be done with our design. And for cut, we're going to go all the way through, which that's fine for our purposes. All right, so there is the nameplate. This is our design, and the next video will go into more detail on the actual manufacturing process.